Since it was introduced in 2020, there has been nothing but a cloud of confusion surrounding DoD contractors. From its soon-to-be mandated requirements to its headline-grabbing controversies, many contractors are left with no choice but to bombard the CMMC-AB with questions during their monthly town hall meetings. The only problem is CMMC-AB doesn't have enough resources to answer everything, and that's where we come in. Welcome to CMMC Unacknowledged, where we answer the unanswered questions that were asked during the monthly CMMC-AB town hall meetings. My name is Todd Stanton. I'm the Regional Sales Manager for all things CMMC at Etactics. And as always, I'm joined by Ty Wittenberg. Ty is the Senior Information Assurance Manager at Rain Associates. Welcome, Ty.
Hey, thanks, Todd. Thanks for having me back.
All right, our question for this episode is, as there's only a handful of authorized C3PAOs at this point, what really prevents price gouging for OSCs who are looking to get certified?
There's the ethics part of it that prevents it, right? There's this expectation for OSC that if they are prepared and ready, they provide their book of preparation to the lead auditor to assess it and say, yes, you're ready, or no, you're not. I can't speak to any individual organization, C3PO's pricing structure. Obviously, that's going to be based off of how much travel can be reduced, how much in-person, obviously, interviews need to be done as well. There's a multitude of factors that go in, but just like any organization, I would challenge all folks to do your due diligence. And even if there is only a limited quantity of C3PAOs out there, if you're partnering with a registered provider organization, partner with them to get some advice and get yourself multiple quotes, right? Because at the end of the day, everybody's going to be going through it, and I think probably a bigger factor that'll drive some of that, Todd, will be, the time frame in which these organizations need to achieve their maturity level certification. So if you're bidding a contract and you know that you're going to need maturity level 3 on it, or you're preparing to bid on it because you've seen the federal contract information and you need maturity level 3, I think scoping of the time necessary to achieve it will have greater impact on what the cost will be versus if you can plan it out further into your fiscal year.
Okay. I understand that the DFARS 7021 CMMC clauses really haven't been put in any contracts yet, correct?
I have not seen it. They ask the question on their questionnaire if folks are doing it, but it hasn't necessarily precluded anyone from being able to win a contract.
Right. So I think that, the types of contractors that are looking to get certified now are more of those that want to use it probably as a competitive advantage as opposed to a requirement, for a contract, because I do think that there is, some preferential, consideration that would be given to a contractor who could say, hey, I'm maturity level 3, certified, even though maybe the requirements don't specify, that requirement in the contract. But I think at this point, you do have OSCs out there that have been planning for the past 2 years, to get certified first, even though a contract that they hold today may not require it, just for that competitive nature. Do you think that there's still an on-site component, going back to the cost aspect of doing these assessments? Is that still the guidance that there will be assessors coming out on site to look at some of the controls, like within access control, for example?
Yeah, you are not going to be able to get away from having an auditor, a certified third-party assessor on site. From an objective evidentiary point of view, you have to be able to, shoulder serve somebody, get in some written documentation. But as you and I have talked before, and as members of your team and I have spoken about on podcasts, this CMMC maturity model is all about culture, and culture is about people. And you have to be able to observe that people are walking their talk. And unlike other certifications or compliance models out there like HIPAA, where you can get your hands slapped but get fined and continue to keep doing business, the CMMC is saying that if you are not doing these things, and the DoD is saying if you're not doing these things, you cannot win a contract. And if you tell us that you're doing these things and you're not, you put yourself exposure to us going after you through the Department of Justice for false claims. So it is clearly going to require somebody to be on site. And what's my favorite phrase that they used to say to me in the military? Trust but verify, which
Right.
always meant somebody was actually going and checking and touching and looking and if you put it into like a Lean Six Sigma or a Kaizen event type thing, somebody has to stand in the circle and be able to observe that this is actually happening for a process.
Before I ask the next question, I just wanted to provide this anecdote that I just learned this morning. And this comes from a C3PAO that is currently going through a DIPCAC assessment. And they reported that in terms of the structure of the DIPCAC team, it consists of a lead assessor, 4 additional assessors, and 3 trainees. Those are all participating virtually with their assessment. And then on site, they have a lead assessor and then a secondary assessor and then their team chief. And I think that there was some administrative support that was also, working to help coordinate schedules. But you add up the people for one assessment, and this is on the DIPCAC side, you're looking at 8 to 10 people per C3PAO. So I guess my question to you is, what is your understanding in terms of the number of assessors, certified assessors, that would be expected to participate in a single assessment for an OSC?
So, that team makeup obviously has to have a lead, has to have an assessor or two to be able to virtual. But if I'm thinking just from the RP standpoint, at a minimum, in my opinion, when you have an assessor, even like when we do financial audits, where we have a cyber support audit function, and then we have accounting auditors, you're looking at least a minimum of 4, in my opinion. And let me peel that back a little bit. A lot of that is determined as well, too, by the size of the organization and complexity, right? A small company of 15 people that still needs a requirement of a maturity level 3. I think 4 people would be overkill. You could probably get away with the lead assessor and an assessor, right?
Right.
So size and complexity of the organization, along number of sites, I think that will kind of lead you down the pathway from a resource and capacity management of how you appropriately assess an organization and provide it in a timely manner and a quality assessment for those folks. So, yeah, I feel like I'm rambling. Help me out.
No, 4 was the answer that I've heard as well. And I think to your point about scope of the organization may have some impact on that. I think that's some guidance that we're still waiting to hear officially from CMMC-AB. Yep. But given that kind of leads into my last question on this topic. So if there are 4 assessors on an OSC assessment, what do you think price tag wise? What's the range that we're looking at for a maturity level 3 certification?
So we're talking just about the C3PAO assessment, correct?
Correct.
So I held an event. I shouldn't say because it was a joint venture. You guys were a registered vendor and partner for us, but we held a summit at Walsh University, and we had organizations seeking certification. We had some manufacturing extensions out there, and then vendors. That conversation point came up quite a few times. And so realistically, what we've looked at and what has been shared with us from the folks that are going through it is you're looking at a range somewhere between $100,000 to $150,000 for your assessment. Wow. That's not even talking about like your network spend, consulting fees if you have a RP helping you through that. So that can, and then your internal cost for time of staff to be involved. So just the assessment alone, the talking points, like I said, were 100 to 150K.
So if you're budgeting for every 3 years going through that certification process, and you're looking at a $33,000 to $50,000 set aside each year just to cover your costs to get the assessment done.
For every 3 years, yeah, definitely. And here's the reality too. Just like we say with organizations when we help them with putting a NIST cybersecurity framework, around their organization and understanding their information security risk. If you start building these process and procedures and behaviors into your culture, potentially, as long as there's not these huge changes and expectations around security, you can start to see a maturity discount, right? Where it shouldn't cost you or take you that much because you're building these processes in. Now, I say all that only to say that under a new leadership organization, under a new executive team in the executive branch, our current president believes that we should have zero trust implemented. And zero trust is going to add another unique dynamic to small business. More important, it's going to create a huge dynamic as well too in the DoD infrastructure. So, you have to keep your eye on the pulse of what's going on out there in the landscape and build it into your business model.
So let me ask you a follow-up on that. So let's say after the first year and you've got some OSCs that have gone through and been certified, but the accreditation board or DoD decides, hey, we want to add this new practice into maturity level 3. Do you think then that those organizations that have already been certified would be required, to go through maybe a gap assessment to say, are you doing this new practice? Like, I know we certified you last year, but now there's this new requirement that we've published and you're certified, so you need to make this new requirement. Do you think that they would wait until that 3-year renewal on the certification, or do you think that they might conduct some gap assessments on new practices they feel are, important to implement now?
I would say to you, just based off of the current trend that you and I both know around the letters that go out, the expectation is they will start asking those questions if you're doing it. Will they require a gap analysis in between? I cannot say with certainty that will be the case, but will it be asked if you're doing those steps? Most definitely. When you think about the DFAR supplement, that was a huge driver, not just the CMMC DoD expectation for maturity levels, but that whole piece around incident response started being questionnaires that primes were asking their sub tiers. So yes, I believe they'll ask the question. To what level of expectation or implementation, I don't know. I would say that given the current framework, the way it states is that your certification is good for 3 years. And given some of the questions and pushback that organizations seeking certification have shared, I don't know if the DoD would direct the CMMC-AB to add that additional burden.
Right.
But clearly, I think anyone who pays attention in the business world for what they do, even if they're only creating widgets, they need to have their finger on the pulse and be thinking about their budgetary planning for the next 3 to 5 years and what's coming out. And if you don't have a good partner for that, make sure that you have somebody that's helping provide that information security mindset to help guide your business over the next, 3-10 years.
Perfect. Well, as always, I appreciate your insight on getting some clarity for some of these questions. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.